So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for an exclusive webinar featuring a panel of FlowForma customers who are taking control of the way they work, collaborating more efficiently, and eradicating silos to accelerate digital transformation. My name is Olivia Bushe, and I'm the CEO at FlowForma, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. We're really excited about this webinar today. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So just before we get started, I want to share a few tips for participating in today's webinar. Please note the webinar is being recorded and the recording will be shared post-webinar to all the attendees and registrations. And if you have trouble with your audio or any other issues during the webinar, you can email info@flowforma.com for assistance. Your lines are currently muted and we suggest you use the chat box if you've got any issues and someone will pick up your query and see if they can assist you. There'll also be a few polls throughout the webinar for you to participate in. And at the end of the session, we would appreciate it if you complete our short feedback form. It should only take a few minutes, so it'd be great if you can do that. Okay, so I'm delighted to be joined today by two FlowForma customers, Carolynne Heron, who's the Director of Corporate Services at Morgan Construction and Environmental Limited, and Lindsay Evans, the Project Management Team Co-ordinator at EML Payments. Hi ladies, welcome to our webinar.
Hello, good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So before we begin, perhaps you'd both like to give a little background into your organisations and your roles there. Maybe start with you, Carolynne.
Sure. Hello from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. So as Olivia mentioned, I'm Director of Corporate Services at Morgan Construction. We are a civil contractor, so we're an earthworks company. We move dirt. We've got about 750 employees right now and growing every day, which is part of why this I'm here today, is the solution around digitizing and helping us be scalable. We are predominantly in Western Canada, but we do a ton of work all over throughout Northern in mining sector, oil and gas infrastructure work. I oversee HR, safety, and IT is not my is not my default. So just a caveat there from a technical standpoint, but so pleased to tell our story, help you understand how we got here.
Thanks, Carolynne. And Lindsay?
Yeah, so I am working for EML Payments. We're a fintech company really focused on different ways of making payments more agile, a lot quicker, move funds conveniently and securely globally. So I'm based in Ireland, and we have a good number of European offices, as well as being in the States and Australia as well. And so I think, you know, being part of a fintech industry, being agile and kind of looking for the next innovative thing, this sort of digitization was kind of the next step for us as well. So really excited to be able to talk about our experiences within that as well.
Great, thanks ladies, and we look forward to hearing more about your journey in the next hour or 50 minutes. So we're just going to move on then to talk about why do organizations need to accelerate process automation now. So, you know, maybe 10 years ago, digital process automation was very much seen as a nice to have and not a necessity. And in today's environment with COVID, the pandemic and lockdown, you know, digital transformation has been pulled forward by at least 5 years, all the experts are telling us. And it'd be interesting for our listeners to hear why, Carolynne, you consider digital process automation a necessity for Morgan at this time?
So it's interesting you talk about the 5 years advancement with COVID. It was about 5 years ago that I never could have imagined that we'd be where we are. We were doing all of our recruiting and onboarding on a literal whiteboard, so up on the wall, and the manager was very clear that only he could erase names and use the felt. And really, that's great if you're hiring 1 or 2 or 5 people. But fast forward to 2020, you know, we had 200, 300 people on the board. We still do today, where we have to hire that many seats. And we need to have good people, we need to have good processes, and it needs to be scalable and sustainable. And so I remember sitting in this old office with this manager arguing about the fact that we should at least get it on an Excel spreadsheet, which was a big stretch. And so then we had this massive Excel spreadsheet into, you know, double Z columns, and 14, 18 different users at any one time on a shared sheet. Lots of risk with that. Lots of risk with
the thought of that's just making me recoil,
yeah.
Caroline.
I know. And, you know, it evolved from the whiteboard to just get it on an Excel. Please just trust me. To then in 2020 saying, you know, please trust me. We need to actually take it another step. We need to stop manually entering it in every single cell, touching candidate names more than once, you know, whether it's emails, phone numbers, all the onboarding layers. Let's get it so that it's automated, and let's work smarter, not harder. Right, and so that's really how we got here. There's so much to tell you in between there, but thankfully we're we're thinking bigger, and we're allowing greater efficiencies across our team with, you know, having multi-layers of hiring and hundreds of people, and pretty amazing reporting on the outside of it. So
yeah, it's really interesting that you should mention that you did have the process already on spreadsheets, because some people do think that digitizing their processes means, well, we've already done that. We have them in email and we have them in spreadsheets, and that's enough, but they don't understand how much more the automation part can bring to things.
yeah, absolutely. You know, when you have concurrent tasks happening and different stakeholders that are all, you know, we're all working towards a common goal, and that's to have somebody ready to go to work and compliant with, you know, safety and regulatory stuff. But, you know, how great when it's all working in tandem, and at any one time you can have real-time reporting and tell you, you know, here's your status report. This is how you're performing. You're either on par or not, and if not, close the gaps. And it's a lot quicker. It's way more efficient and tighter.
Okay. So then I suppose, Lindsay, you know, Forrester research would say that the top reasons for digitizing and automating is to increase productivity and to improve employee and customer experiences. And I was just wondering, would that align with your experience at EML, and is that one of the reasons that you moved to process automation, or tell us a little bit about the reasons for adopting a tool like FlowForma?
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree with that for sure. I think productivity for our employees and then the overall customer experience is definitely at the forefront of what we're trying to kind of focus on. And this kind of came at a really interesting time for us, because EML acquired a number of different businesses across Europe, and we were kind of all coming together with our own established processes, probably all very Excel based, and, you know, very much set in, this is how this company does it, this is how this company does it. And we really needed something that was going to allow us to come together as kind of one team and be able to keep that level of productivity up, as well as that delivering to customers on a consistent basis. But while also kind of being very aware that all these new acquisitions were going to bring in a lot more business, and we needed to be able to kind of scale to that as well. And so I think that was definitely one of the main focuses for us, was to get a consistent procedure that we could use across the board, but also recognizing that it was never going to be a static process for us. It was going to have to constantly change, both with us as a fintech industry, which is constantly evolving, but also with the needs of our clients, and kind of as we learned to work together across the board. So there was quite a few different ways that we really wanted to bring that out in our digital process. But the main thing for us was trying to do all of that while kind of learning to work with each other and but still delivering on time. So there was a lot of moving parts, and I think it's definitely been a learning curve for a lot of us, but that level of productivity has been something we've been really trying to hold on to, for sure.
You needed something that was agile and you could refine over time and could move and grow and change with the business.
Yeah, exactly. And we've definitely found that with the number of iterations we've had since we started. You know, we kind of built it based on some of our needs, but we really needed that to be a more holistic approach to kind of cover all of the different entities, their own business focus, and try and make it one that was fit for purpose for everyone.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. One thing I just wanted to draw attention to was for us as a vendor in this space and a solution provider, it's very difficult at times to relay to people the cost of doing nothing. So the cost of delaying digitization, that's actually costing people time and money, because everything isn't going to grind to a stop if you don't digitize tomorrow. So it's very hard just to quantify that. So if you'd both like to input to that, as customers who have been through it and now are starting to see some of the results, what would you say to people out there that aren't treating it as an imperative task and something they must do right now?
Yeah, I would say you don't know what you don't know, and so you just have to start. And I think the cost is that, like, we're seeing it throughout the world, the leapfrog. We used to have Walkmans, and then we went to a Discman, and then you go to a smartphone, or you think about the camera. I mean, this happens quickly, and if as a business, if we don't innovate and get ahead of it, we will be behind for sure. So that that I think the cost, I don't know what the cost is. It's the opportunity cost that you may not even realize you missed because you were so behind in times.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree with that. And I think, we can all get really comfortable in what we were doing and how it's always been done. But we don't actually realize the potential behind it until we actually start implementing that and following through on it. So again, yeah, the immediate cost may not be obvious, but you can kind of see all the different value that comes out of that in terms of productivity and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, so just following on from that, Lindsay, what would you say were some of the key indicators that caused yourselves and EML Payments to pursue a solution such as the FlowForma? When we talk to our customer base, they would say there's several different indicators that highlighted the need to move now to digital process automation. So what would you say were the key indicators at EML Payments?
Yeah, so I think so the process that we actually put in place first was our client onboarding process. And so given the kind of highly regulated nature of our business, there's so many people working together on projects, and we really needed one solution that would fit each team across the board. And where there is that sort of one source of truth, there is that reporting, there is that transparency, and you're not, relying on email chains or spreadsheets here and there, and where there is that risk of stuff going missing. And so I think that was kind of the main driving force, especially as I mentioned at the time that it came, when we were kind of bringing all these multiple different systems that were maybe not quite fit for purpose anyway together to try and put it into that one solution. And so I think that was probably our biggest driving factor, and kind of not relying on, we're just doing this because it's always what's being done. And I think that definitely comes with a bit of fear and a bit of hesitancy, and rightly so, because change is quite scary, and people know how to use their Excel and they know how to rely on it. But I think it can only take you so far, and if you do want to grow, you kind of have to really invest in that innovation in order to do that.
Yeah, so I guess that makes sense to me. I mean, Caroline, would you say those examples are similar indicators to you saw at Morgan, or was it something very different for yourselves?
Actually, very similar to Lindsay's experience at EML. So just when you think about building trust with your internal stakeholders or customers, how not better to do it than through accountability, through that transparency. The reporting has been huge for us, and it's so interesting because as you organize your data and get it better and better at reporting it in a way that tells the right narrative or story, it's so powerful, because then of course the organization just wants more. They want more information, and so it's a very efficient way to do a deeper dive and understand the full picture, or just get a high level snapshot. And so I think that would be another big indicators that we needed more reporting, we needed more information, quicker, faster, at all times of the day, 24/7, and we got it through this.
Yeah, so I think what you're saying is you have so much data in the organization and you're not really using it for any kind of intelligence until you put in a tool like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm sure everyone can appreciate, you typically will have the same Excel spreadsheet, just slightly different, and every desktop has their own little Excel and they have it their way. And then everyone's saving it, which is also, that backing up on the system, servers are getting overloaded. There's all of this. And so why wouldn't we bring it all together into one shared database and then create the right narrative that makes sense for multi-users? So it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and get that single source of the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think we're going to move on to a poll question now. So give everyone a few minutes to answer that. So what are your requirements for a digital process automation tool? And I think it's a multiple choice answer, but you can pick more than one. So you can select all that apply. So there might be a couple of requirements or some requirements that overlap. And these are the results. So ease of implementation would be the leading answer there. No, it's standardized process across your enterprise, followed by ease of implementation. So that ties in with really, Lindsay, what you and Caroline were both saying in terms of came a time where you needed, in order to scale, you had to standardize your processes. The spreadsheets and the email could take everyone so far, but we needed a single source of the truth so you can interpret the data and make accurate decisions. And you can't scale without that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not surprised to see those responses for sure.
Okay. So we're going to move on now, and we're going to talk a little bit about what we like to call at FlowForma the acorn approach. So the acorn approach is what we would see as best practice here at FlowForma in order to encourage people to innovate and to increase adoption, and ultimately to roll out the FlowForma process automation tool across the business. So very often people would say to us, this is all well and good. I love the idea of it, but I just don't know where to start. Where do I start? And we would always encourage business people to start with a process. We would call it an obvious process. So, there is going to be one real pain point usually in the organization that is causing you problems because it's a paper trail, or paper's getting lost, delays are happening, decisions aren't happening quick enough, and you could quickly see the tangible benefits from digitizing it. And then that we would kind of say that's the place to start with that process, get that up and running, let the organization see the impact of digitizing it, get the buy-in, and then look to broaden the use of the tool to other processes throughout the business afterwards. So, Caroline, we're going to talk to you first on this. Is that an approach that you used at Morgan? How did you get up and started, and what would your advice be on that?
Okay, so a couple of things. We did start digitalizing some of our safety forms, and we recognize that we need to get smarter with how the data goes in and out, and so that was an easy way through some of our forms. But I have to admit, with FlowForma, we started with the most complex, which is very courageous of us, but largely it was because of a local provider, Pontum Innovations, who we were working with Power BI and just different solutions, and they already had some trust with FlowForma, lots of trust, and they said, listen, this is a great solution for you, and so that helped us. I just ripped the Band-Aid and said, let's do it, and let's do it with our most complex, because this onboarding whiteboard was a beast. And I knew that we couldn't continue the way we were. It didn't make sense. And I couldn't wait for the rest of the organization to catch up to the need. I needed to just get this moving for my group. And then I thought through our group, through HR, we could then influence change throughout the rest of the organization.
I suppose, Carol, I'm just listening to what you're saying there, and I'm thinking, you said you just ripped the Band-Aid off. So that, to me, that sounds like you're an innovative champion within the organization, and a little bit like myself, wants to see progress quickly. So do you think that, I would imagine, that's why it progressed as quickly, because they had a champion such as yourself within the organization to push things forward?
Well, unfortunately, I don't know that I would give myself 5 stars on the speed at which we progressed, only because our organization was under so much pressure. And it wasn't up to me to make it work. I needed the manager that was leading this group and the onboarding to ultimately buy in. And I needed her to be the lead change agent, because it's her team then that has to use the tool. And so this took almost a year. But that's not FlowForma. That was largely because we were hiring hundreds and hundreds of people during a pandemic and a very challenging labor market. And so we had all these other roadblocks, and then I'm saying, get it done, automate, build this new process. And that takes time, because you have to work out the bugs, you've got to build in, make sure it all makes sense. And then it keeps changing, because we're dealing with human beings. And so the data kept changing. We couldn't just pause it and then start up where we left off, because there's already 100 people have been hired, and those people are no longer relevant for the tool. So there was a lot of stops and starts and pauses, but I'm pleased to report that as of February 1 of 22, we went live with it with the team. And what's so interesting is now that manager who is like, are you kidding me? You want me to do what? What does this mean? What is this FlowForma thing? Now she's an expert. She's a subject matter expert, and she's actually quite picky. She wants it to be perfect. So she continues to make tweaks while we're live. And she's actually, the other day she came to my office, and she was so frustrated because the team was moving at a slower pace than she was hoping at this, mid-February. And I said, but remember where you were? It took you a year. And so it's quite exciting to see the evolution. And now we have a number of departments in our organization that are working on much simpler processes that I think will they'll leverage the corporate license, which is nice, and help share that cost, and I think make us better as an organization.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. So there you've kind of talked about how you had some resistance in the company. And I mean, digitization is, a lot of it is change. It's change management. And mostly as people, we don't like change. We're not sure about it. It's the unknown. It's just interesting to me how you addressed that. So you addressed that by getting the person who was objecting to the change the most to lead the project, really.
Yeah, and that's the best way to do it, because of course you're going to be reluctant to let go of what you already. It's the perfect change cycle. We all have to grieve, and we're scared, and we feel like you're taking something away. And so by lining up my manager and getting her in front of it, and working very closely with FlowForma and Pontum, our local solutions provider, there was trust that was just built up, and she doesn't need to know all the back end, because there's that no code, and we do have Pontum as kind of our experts from a technical standpoint, but she knows what the outputs are. She started to trust it. She said, I just want this to go. And so over Christmas, her team was working on inputting all the data, and I'm so proud of her. I told her, this is a leadership milestone for you. You need to remember this story, because she was so reluctant, and now she's, I think, quite a champion, which is so great for so many reasons. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great turnaround story. It's a great success story. So Lindsay, if we look at EML Payments, what approach did you take? How did you get started? Was it the acorn approach of a feeling it was quite a complex process as well?
Yeah, in hindsight, I probably would have liked to have gone with a smaller and more simpler process, but it was definitely a needs-driven approach, where it was like, this is the biggest impact we need to have right now. And like I said before, it was that sort of timing issue, where it was the right time to bring in that automation and consistency across the board. So that was definitely a massive driving factor in it. I think when we started it as well, we kind of expected it to be a lot more simple from our own perspective. And then the more we kind of learned about how much more we could automate, or all the sophistication within FlowForma, we kind of kept making it a lot bigger and bigger. And we're like, oh, we could add this and we could add that. And that's kind of why it kept changing, and there was a lot of transition within it. But I think our initial scope was probably quite narrow, and we thought this will be great, we'll knock it out soon. But then the more we kind of realized we could do with it, the more we wanted to get it right and really make sure it kind of covered our bases throughout the business.
Yeah, and we do see that a lot. That is the beauty of the tool. I mean, we do see a lot of customers that have a very simple process in mind, and then when they get to training and they onboard and they realize the scope of complexes that FlowForma can handle, they kind of say, oh no, well actually we're going to do this, this and this as well. So, like we've had some, there is the acorn approach, but we have had some customers. We had one construction company in the UK that went live with 120 processes at once, because that's the way they wanted to do it, and that was within an 8-week time frame, but they wanted to wait until they had them all ready and just launch it at once. Now that can be quite overwhelming for some companies, which is why we would say get started, but we do often see where they have a couple of processes, and the more they get to know the tool and how easy it is to use, and the business user can do it, all these other ideas spring up. So what you're saying there, Lindsay, we do see that quite a lot.
Yeah, and we're sorry,
go ahead.
Say, no, we're definitely seeing that as well, like because our onboarding process sits with probably 8 or 9 different teams. Every time we kind of get off one of the calls, then I get a message from one of the teams going, we have this process, could FlowForma do that? And it really has then spiraled into kind of encouraging other teams to think, like, how else could we move away from this kind of manual spreadsheet, and to sort of seeing how simple FlowForma is from a user perspective. Like, they're like, why wouldn't we kind of do that? So I think there's definitely a lot, like I think we've got, that was our one big one, and as of 2 weeks ago, we've put in another 6 into the building and another 5 to come from that. So it's suddenly just kind of exploded, the more visibility it's getting across the organization, and that's even across regions as well. And so I think, getting the one over the line, getting the buy-in and getting people using it is kind of the key, and then it kind of flows from there, where you kind of see the real potential across the board.
Yeah, and I think, Carolynne, you have maybe 4 or 5 processes live now with FlowForma, maybe one in final testing stage. Cam from Pontem was over here this week, so we were having a discussion about your processes that were up and running and live. So just so everyone knows, Pontem are our Canadian partner. So I guess it would be great to see your view on before and afters. I understand some of the projects are very early and you wouldn't have metrics around it, but you still probably have some sort of gut instinct around how long it now takes to get a process deployed or from beginning to end approved in comparison to before you had FlowForma. So it'd be great if you could share some early results that you've seen with the audience.
Sure, and it is fairly early, but I would say that we recognize already the speed at which the information is going in and how it's organized, and especially then the output. So I know I keep focusing on this, but the real-time reporting is absolutely a gem. And so it's very interesting. One little story, my manager had said, in that first week we went live, that she was, she said, well, the way the reports work, and we're going to have to pull it out and then put it into an email. And I had to stop her and say, well, hold on. We're not going to do everything the way we used to do it. And that's the beauty of this, is that your team doesn't need to stop and take 45 minutes to format an email. Your customers get to see it in real time. That's the whole point of this. But that shift of thinking, and there's, I'm sure, way more low-hanging fruit that we're not aware of, because it's just still so new, for sure, and it's new for the team. But I have no doubt that we are, we're moving in the right direction. And it is interesting, like, just a heads up for those that are thinking of doing this, that, as the system might be, processing, and there's like, they call it spins on the screen, might be your internet connectivity or how much data. It might look like it's a lag, and they say, well, it feels like it's slow. But what they're not remembering, how quickly we forget. how slow it is when we manually have to do everything. And that when we have 10 or 20 or 50 of us entering the same information, now we're entering it once with that single source of truth. And so there's a whole bunch there. If only I had time to study the ROI, but I know that we'll soon forget the old way, and then we'll want to even improve it more and just continue to get quicker and faster and more efficient and detailed. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, that's a great story again, just to show how, and I think that's true. You get the continuous improvement journey just keeps going. You know, you get better and better, and you want to then just improve it more. I mean, Lindsay, what have you found? I mean, what would be the notable changes or improvements that you can see coming into play?
Yeah, so it's similar to Carolynne. You know, we're still in the very early stages, so we're kind of just seeing those results kind of coming out. I think the reporting has definitely been key for us as well, and being able to see exactly where different onboarding of clients is at which different stages. You can kind of see where our process is falling down, so you can kind of adjust it quite quickly, and you can do all of that in sort of real time. So I think being able to track that from start to finish and noticing any bottlenecks and stuff like that has been really valuable for us, and we can kind of tweak our own processes then to fit that. And I think just kind of gives each team a bit more autonomy as well, because it's like you can see where it's at, you can see that they're the ones dealing with it, and there's not as much chasing going on between people and nagging and, you know, all of that. So I think that's been really positive as well.
Yeah, the process, I think, looks after the execution, which is quite nice. You're not having to chase something, the system does that for you if somebody's overdue. So it kind of does all the reminders, and you know, you're not having to do that yourself. It's just automatically taken care of. So I think that's another piece that it's very hard to quantify the benefits of that. But you know, you're not spending a week chasing somebody for a piece of information that you need. It's just right there in the system.
Yeah, exactly. And you're just less likely to kind of drop the ball, because you know, if anything's assigned to you, you can easily go in and see what it is, and kind of tick that off. Whereas you're not kind of looking at an email saying I'll get back to that later. You know, there is that a bit more accountability to it, which is great.
Yeah, and I think that actually, in a way, fits in with the times that we're in. So we all know that remote working is a big thing now. You know, we've been in a pandemic for 2 years, and you know, most companies are either keeping a total remote working model or some sort of hybrid. But when people are working from home, they need that structure. So process automation in the system gives them some structure for the day. It lets them know what their tasks are. You know, and a lot of people who maybe prior to the pandemic didn't have experience working from home, it's not an easy change, especially for people just coming into the workplace. So you get that structure. That's one feedback that we have had from customers, is that it provides that structure around remote working that you wouldn't have, or that you maybe have to structure yourself, Lindsay. Like you're saying, look at your emails, you know, think about, have to get back, mark that, whereas the system provides you a structure for your workday.
Yeah, definitely. And I think everybody's really been enjoying that, because it is just a really quick and clear check. They know where they stand, and yeah, you're not kind of bogged down in as many emails and stuff. So I think that's been really interesting to see, particularly over this kind of transition to the remote working, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked a little bit with both of you about having a champion in the business, and I think we often find that with our most successful projects, they begin when there's an understanding of the benefits at C-level around implementing a digital transformation project. So it's a strategic initiative. It's implemented from the C-level, and they understand the benefits that they can get from a solution like this, and then they champion that. So do you agree that that's really important to have?
Do you want to go ahead, Carolynne? Or?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I believe, you know, I believe that we have to over communicate at the top, and then drive it up and down, sideways, talk about it. You always need to give, I think, employees a head start on what the vision is, and have them understand the bigger picture, and then keep talking about it. And that will help drive change. It'll help drive that, that 1% marginal gain, or the innovation, and get people thinking bigger, and understanding why are we going in this direction. And we just did an engagement survey which just closed a week ago, and it never is too far off on the communication side, that they want to hear more and more from corporate. They want to hear more and more about our vision. And we always feel like we overstate things. Not at all, especially when it comes to change. And I think then once you do that, then you start to drive all those little change agents throughout the organization that start to carry your story forward, and help share it with the next person who might be reluctant to hear the message. So yeah, I think it's absolutely foundational to successful implementation and buy-in.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. And I think, we had it definitely being driven from the top level, from the C level, where this was a priority for them. Like I said, with all the companies coming together, that was always at the forefront of their mind. Is like, how do we keep business as usual going? How do we maintain consistency and all of that? So there was always this focus for us from the top down, which really did help to kind of drive it. But I think also what really helped us is the whole agility of it. So you're not just coming in with this really rigid process that you're saying, this is how we now do it, go for it, but because there is that agility, and that it kind of just allows for that collaborative approach, where you kind of can say, like, yeah, we're all stakeholders in this, we're all building it together, and it will adapt over time to be suitable for everyone. And I think that helped get that level of buy-in as well, and definitely made it kind of easier for us in the long run. I mean, it is trickier, when you're kind of changing the system and the process all the time to suit those needs. But I think at the end of it, it's going to be really worth it when you really have this robust approach that everyone is individually bought into as well. But I think having that starting from the top down for us made all the difference.
Yeah, so what would be your advice to people on the webinar today who are considering a process automation tool? I mean, I was talking to a lady at a company yesterday, and she's just starting to investigate the tools out there, and she hasn't brought it to C-level at this stage, because she said they'd be more receptive to her coming with a solution and outlining the business case and the benefits. So she's at the early stages. I mean, for someone like that, what would be your advice to them? We'll start with you, Lindsay.
Perfect. I think potentially, and it's not what we did, but I think starting with the smaller wins, where you are picking off a number of smaller processes that are quick to implement, easy to use, and then the kind of value of that is really obvious at the start. I think that can really help kind of get the buy-in from everyone, and kind of show that visibility up to the top, but also the people that are using it, that's increasing their productivity, making their day-to-day jobs easier. But I think potentially starting with those smaller ones, and building on them from there, would probably be one of the things I'd suggest. And I think, part of that is, there's this fear that when you start to build out these processes, like we were saying, like letting go of the old ones, you feel like, is there going to be a lot of duplication of effort? Am I going to be just copying and pasting things from my Excel sheet now into this, and I'm doubling what I'm doing and stuff? So I think getting those smaller ones out there, where people can clearly see, actually, that's not what this is about. I can see the benefits for me at this level, and you can see them then across the board as well. So I think, yeah, potentially starting smaller than we did would be a good idea.
I completely agree. And I would suggest, when you look at a process, when you're in autopilot, you don't always realize all the many steps and how important understanding the workflow is. And this, when you go digital, it takes a lot of brain power to kind of eliminate maybe redundant steps, or steps that actually don't make sense, but it's just the way we've always done it, right? Yeah. And so, to Lindsay's point, had we started with something less cumbersome, and just get into some good training and habits on tearing down the workflow, and looking at do the process map, and really recognize what's the point of this? Like, why do we do what we're doing? And then, rip it apart. And that takes a lot. I think it's changing the way we think. And so that would be a great way to get ready for FlowForma and to help start to integrate it into the organization, is just to start training people on tearing things down and not just doing it the way we've always done it. Like, just take off your blinders, right?
Yeah, or just if that's too overwhelming, do what you both have done and just get started, and then refine it and fix it as you go. But I do think it's a really important point that there might be steps you need to just not do at all, because it's just the way you always did it and it doesn't make sense anymore as the company has evolved. So I think that's some great advice. Now I think we're going to move on to our last poll. So we'd be interested in hearing, what process challenges are you currently facing? And again, you can select more than one. Okay, so we're going to see the results. So, inability to customize pre-existing system solutions. So, Caroline, I saw your reaction there to that. Do you want to comment on that?
Well, I was looking at the information is lost in email or paper chains, and that is absolutely our organization. Not that it's lost, but everybody has, like, we overuse emails, and we're constantly sending emails and replying all, and my goodness, absolutely that slows down everyone. Anyone that has any priorities, they hear the bell or they get the notification pop up, and that distracts us. And so I absolutely agree with the participants in terms of just tightening that up and eliminating basically communication that's not necessary. So that's why I giggled.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't. There was a block over my screen, so I hadn't seen that 100% there, and for some reason that color is very low on my screen. But of course that's the one that everyone has chosen. That's probably the one that's easiest to address as well, I would have thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And for our team, for example, we have so many different users, and we have every recruiter is paired up with a coordinator who helps with the onboarding. And once the recruiter says an offer has been accepted, it basically triggers the coordinator that they have work to do. And for sure, there's some triggers that we've turned on or notifications that can go to email, but they can also follow then their candidate along the continuum and not have to go back and forth communicating in any other format. It stays with the file with the candidate, touch it once and move on, which is really, really, productive.
Yeah, I like that, touch it once. I'm going to coin that. I like that phrase. So, Lindsay, what about yourself? Are you saying, you're not surprised at those results either?
No, I'd probably agree with them, definitely. So, especially similar to Carolynne, like maybe things weren't getting lost in email chains, but definitely just creating so much more work, making it way more time consuming, or kind of being put on the long finger, because you have to read through this massive thread to kind of understand or remind yourself where we were at with a certain thing. And then often you end up saving the email in SharePoint or whatever, and it doesn't kind of make going back and looking at anything historically easy, or if you're doing any sort of auditing stuff, it's an absolute nightmare. But whereas with the FlowForma side of things, what we found is, you can kind of go in and you can see any changes made, but you're watching that go through the process itself, and you're not trying to put so many different emails in context again and reframe that. It's all kind of captured in that one process.
Yeah, and you have the automatic audit trail as well with FlowForma, which is great for things like that. So just conscious of time, we're going to move on and talk about digitizing for outcomes and value. Obviously, the end game for people implementing a tool such as FlowForma is to see tangible benefits and outcomes that drive value. So if you, I mean, you've already covered quite a lot of the value you're seeing from a tool like FlowForma. I guess it's just if there's any final points you'd like to highlight, even around competitive advantage, you know, improve productivity, those kind of things. What's the value that you're really needing from a tool like FlowForma?
I like that you have empower business people. You're talking about the no code on your slide, but I do see an outcome here is empowering the team, because I think if we can remove roadblocks and barriers to how they do their work, it'll impact them in so many different ways. It'll impact how they perform, their level of engagement, hopefully their innovation, and what they, you know, what do they do with the time that we've just saved them to make us a better company. And so it all links up to competitive advantage and all that. But I do think from where I sit, I think the empowerment that this creates within my employee base and how they do their work and how easy we make it is going to drive a whole bunch of value. It's just intangible right now. It's hard to explain what that looks like, but I'm excited to see what tomorrow brings with digitalization.
Yeah, so we see a lot of that. I mean, hours of administration saved. You know, we've had companies that have saved 6,000 hours of administration by digitizing 5 key processes. So that's maybe a whole person is getting their time freed up. And, you know, especially in construction, we talk about man hours, and we've had, you know, 700 man hours saved by joint ventures and automating one process. So we see a lot of man hours, and the other side of things that we see is sustainability. So, you know, we're saving paper, and, you know, with paper there's often cost. So there's the cost of moving that paper from location to location. So there's a cost saving there, as well as, you know, a sustainability message. You're right, those things are very hard to quantify at the start. You just know that they're gone. I mean, Lindsay, what would the value that is most important to you at EML?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is the sort of probably the time saving and the sort of structure that it kind of gives. So at one point within our process, there's, you know, we have a meeting once a week where we discuss everything that's at whatever stage. And I think, you know, even those meetings are becoming far more productive because they're structured. We know exactly what's to come. The information coming is consistent. And so we're actually moving through the stages a lot quicker because those conversations are facilitated much better, and we're not going through the emails again and stuff like that. So I think just facilitating those discussions, those approvals, and all of that has saved us a huge amount of time. Again, yeah, not quantifiable yet, but I'd be really interested to kind of see as we roll it out further, like the metrics that we kind of get in, and we've kind of started tracking it on a monthly basis of like how many things are approved within what time frame over these periods. And like, I think we only have 3 months of metrics at the moment, but we can already see the difference it's made, and I can only imagine how much more that's going to improve once it's actually running exactly how we want it to.
Super. Okay, so that's great. I mean, some real value things that I'm sure most companies would be looking for there. We're going to move to some questions and answers. So if you have any questions and answers, just pop them into the chat function, and we'll try to answer them in the few minutes that we have left. The first question that's come in, I'm going to direct to you, Caroline. It's, how long does it take to digitize a process with FlowForma?
Oh gosh, like I said at the beginning, I'm not a technical expert, so it took us a little longer, as you know, but you know, when it's a simpler process, it doesn't take long at all. Once you know what it is that you're trying to do, it's really intuitive. It's very simple. My understanding, I haven't been the one driving it, but it really doesn't need to take that long. If you've made the decision to implement this, then it's just about starting, and it'll be next thing you know, you're moving on to the next project.
Yeah, so Lindsay, would you like to, I know that you're very hands-on with the tools, so would you like to share your experience there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, so yeah, I'm definitely not an IT person at all, but I am the one in charge of
it, right? That's the point.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm the one building all of these processes. So if I can do it, I can guarantee anybody on this call could do it. It is really intuitive, and there's way more that it can do than you probably realize at the outset. So our first one, because it was as sophisticated as it ended up being, probably took us a lot longer than it should have. But purely that's on us rather than FlowForma, just while we kind of got our head around exactly what we were trying to achieve and nailing that down. But in the last kind of couple of weeks, like I said, we were building out these extra 4 or 5 processes, and it surprises me every time where like you sit down for an afternoon and you nearly have it ready for testing and you're like, I must be missing something, you know, but it actually is that simple. And when you have a good plan, you know exactly what way you want the process to flow. I think the build is kind of the easy part. Like FlowForma just makes that the easy part, which previously I think would have been an absolute nightmare.
Just continuing on from that, Lindsay, then, I mean, you both talked about how your processes often need changes, you know, it's a fluid environment. Do you find you can make those changes in-house yourself with the FlowForma tool?
Yeah, generally, they're usually quite straightforward, but I think, you know, sometimes there's a lot that's kind of beyond what I know the tool does, and I think our account managers, I'm sure they're sick of hearing from us at this stage, but you know, there's kind of that support where you need it, and you know, they can kind of show it to you that once off, and then you actually know what you're doing, because it is that sort of logical sort of step to it. But yeah, generally I think 9 times out of 10, yeah, the changes are really straightforward, and you can even upgrade the previous forms to kind of cover them as well and stuff like that. So
yeah, so it's just like any
sense.
tool, like Excel or whatever. You need to invest a certain amount of time into learning how to use it, but you don't need to be technical. It's all logically oriented, and customer success team here are happy to help with your queries. We have another question that's just come in that says, who championed FlowForma in your organization? So I know, Carolynne, we talked about that was probably yourself, but did you have other C-level support?
Oh, absolutely. You know, and it kind of boiled down to the fact that we can, you know, it's like analysis by paralysis by analysis. You know, you can sit there and try to figure out what the best option is and talk about it, or you can just finally drive it. And so you know, I remember walking to the office next to me as our CFO, and I said, listen, this is what I'm going to do. Because my group needs a solution. And he's like, okay, sounds good. And went over and talked to our vice president, who, you know, I work closely with, and he absolutely said, good job. And then now finance, which is CFO, of course, and, you know, on the equipment and maintenance side, which is the VP, we've driven a whole bunch of stuff: fleet management, maintenance repairs, expense claims. You know, it can be very, very simple, but somebody needed to start, right? But, you know, luckily we all work with, we work closely together. There was no need to even drive consensus, because if there's a business need and it makes good sense, which it did, and of course we trusted Pontum, who is a partner with FlowForma, it made sense to say, let's do this now. Why not? It's 2021, which it was at the time. So yeah.
Yeah, so that's great to see, you know, that you got that support across the business with your peers. Carolynne, what about you, Lindsay? So who championed it in your business? You mentioned before it was from the top.
Yeah. So it was definitely from the sort of CEO, COO level. I think, you know, they were kind of working on all of these companies coming together from a much higher level with a lot more complexity to it, and this was kind of a natural byproduct of improving one of those processes. So they were really keen to kind of get that off the ground, especially because it was our onboarding, so it was related to us getting that new business. So there was a huge incentive behind that, to kind of keep that moving, keep it on track, but kind of keep it consistent and stable. So that period of transition didn't actually affect our productivity or our customers' experience or journey throughout.
Great. Yeah, so I think it just highlights it is important to kind of have that strategic initiative and that buy-in from your senior management to support the rollout of a tool such as this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so we're coming to the end of our time. I think that's all the questions we have time for at the moment. If we didn't get to your question, we'll follow up with you after the webinar to make sure we get you an answer. I just want to thank you, ladies, for your time today. That was a great conversation, and it's great to see the value that FlowForma is bringing to your organisation. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah, absolute pleasure.
Just before we wrap up, I just want to give everyone on the call a quick reminder that you can book a one-to-one call with any of our process experts or sign up for a free personalised demo or a free 14-day trial via our website, flowforma.com. And our experts are more than happy to help steer your digital transformation in the right direction. So just reach out and we'd love to help you with that. Just at the end of the webinar, just to remind you, you'll be invited to fill in a quick survey, and we'd really appreciate if you could take a moment to fill that out. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Thanks again, Lindsay and Caroline, and I hope you enjoyed the webinar and have a great rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.